Anne Boleyn was born around 1501 into the English aristocracy, the daughter of Thomas Boleyn, a skilled diplomat, and Elizabeth Howard, a member of one of the most powerful noble families in England. From birth, Anne was surrounded by influence, status, and high expectations. Though she was not initially destined for the throne, her family ensured she received an exceptional education, both academic and cultural, that would later shape her path to power. Unlike many women of her time, Anne's upbringing focused not only on domestic skills, but also on intellectual development. She learned to read and write in English and French, studied scripture and classical literature, and became skilled in music, dance, and embroidery. Her early education reflected the values of the Renaissance, where knowledge, refinement, and cultural awareness were prized, especially in royal courts. At a young age, Anne was sent abroad to continue her education, an unusual opportunity even for noble girls. First, she joined the court of Margaret of Austria in the Netherlands. Margaret, a respected ruler and patron of the arts, was known for her progressive views and provided a sophisticated environment that nurtured Anne's intellect and curiosity. Anne's education continued when she entered the service of Queen Claude of France. At the French court, she was immersed in a world of elegance, fashion, politics, and religious debate. It was here that Anne honed her charm and confidence, becoming fluent in French and absorbing the reformist ideas circulating across Europe, ideas that would later influence her support for the English Reformation. By the time Anne returned to England in her late teens, she was far more than a typical noblewoman. She was clever, well-spoken, stylish, and informed, a striking figure who would soon catch the attention of King Henry VIII and forever alter the course of English history. Before Anne Boleyn became one of the most controversial queens in English history, she was already making waves at court due to her intelligence, charm, and striking presence. Her early years at the English court were marked by both romantic intrigue and political maneuvering, laying the groundwork for her eventual rise to power. One of Anne's earliest potential matches was with James Butler, the heir to the Earl of Ormond. This proposed marriage was part of a political effort to resolve a family dispute between the Boleyns and Butlers over the Ormond title and estates in Ireland. However, the match never materialized, possibly due to shifting political alliances and Anne's growing prominence at the English court. Soon after, Anne became involved in a romantic relationship with Henry Percy, the son and heir of the Earl of Northumberland. Their relationship was reportedly serious, and the couple may have even exchanged vows in secret. However, the union was abruptly ended, likely due to political pressure from Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, who may have acted on the orders of King Henry VIII or Anne's own family. Percy was forced to marry someone else, and Anne was dismissed from court for a time. Despite these setbacks, Anne returned to court and began serving as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Catherine of Aragon. It was during this time, around 1526, that she first caught the eye of King Henry VIII, reportedly during a jousting tournament. Unlike her sister Mary, who had previously been the king's mistress, Anne refused to become just another romantic conquest. Her resistance only fueled Henry's obsession. Anne's intelligence, wit, and refusal to yield made her stand out in a court full of women eager to please the king. Her ability to navigate courtly life, along with her growing influence, marked the beginning of her extraordinary rise from noblewoman to queen, and set the stage for a royal romance that would change the course of English history. Anne Boleyn's relationship with King Henry VIII was not just a passionate courtly romance, it was a turning point in English history. What began as the king's infatuation with a lady-in-waiting soon escalated into a political and religious revolution that would alter the future of the monarchy and the church forever. Henry VIII became deeply obsessed with and around the mid-1520s. Unlike many women at court, Anne refused to become his mistress, insisting that she would not surrender her virtue unless she became his wife. This stance only intensified Henry's desire. Over time, he expressed his devotion through a series of at least 17 passionate love letters, an unusual gesture for a king, and a clear sign of his emotional investment. At the heart of Henry's determination to marry and was his desperate need for a male heir. His marriage to Queen Catherine of Aragon had failed to produce a surviving son, and Henry began to see Anne not only as the woman he loved, but also as the key to securing the Tudor dynasty. He petitioned the Pope for an annulment of his marriage to Catherine, arguing that it had been invalid from the start due to her previous marriage to his brother. However, the Pope refused to grant the annulment, largely due to political pressure from Catherine's nephew, Emperor Charles V. Faced with this impasse, Henry took radical action. Encouraged by and who supported many of the ideas of the Protestant Reformation, Henry began distancing England from the authority of the Roman Catholic Church. This led to one of the most significant events in English history, the English Reformation. In 1533, Henry broke from the Church of Rome, declared himself the supreme head of the Church of England, and married Anne Boleyn. His obsession had not only changed his personal life, but had also redefined the religious and political landscape of an entire nation. The relationship between Anne Boleyn and King Henry VIII reached a dramatic turning point in late 1532. By this time, their long courtship, marked by secrecy, scandal, and political turmoil, had evolved into something far more consequential. After years of resisting Henry's advances, Anne finally agreed to a physical relationship, likely after receiving a promise of marriage. Soon after, she became pregnant, an event that made swift action necessary. In November 1532, Henry and Anne were secretly married in a private ceremony away from the public eye. The secrecy was due to the fact that Henry's annulment from Catherine of Aragon had not yet been officially recognized by the Church. However, with Anne's pregnancy progressing, the couple could no longer wait. In January 1533, a second, more formal marriage ceremony took place, this time with greater confidence, as Henry was preparing to defy the Pope and assert his authority as head of the Church of England. Anne's coronation took place on June 1, 1533, in a lavish ceremony at Westminster Abbey. She was crowned not just as consort, but with a crown normally reserved for reigning monarchs, symbolizing her elevated status and the legitimacy of her unborn child. The event was filled with grandeur and splendor, designed to reinforce the power of the new queen and the new religious order Henry had created. On September 7, 1533, Anne gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth. While the child would one day become one of the greatest monarchs in English history, the birth was a disappointment to Henry, who had been hoping for a male heir to secure the Tudor dynasty. Nevertheless, Elizabeth was declared legitimate and named princess. Though Anne had achieved the crown and fulfilled Henry's deepest desires, the pressure to deliver a son would continue to define her short and turbulent reign. Her rise, once meteoric, would soon face new and deadly challenges. After rising to the pinnacle of power as Queen of England, Anne Boleyn faced a series of challenges that quickly began to unravel the stability of her reign. Though her marriage to King Henry VIII was born out of passion and political upheaval, her time as queen was far from peaceful or secure. One of Anne's greatest struggles was her public image. Many in the English court and among the general population viewed her with suspicion and disdain. Unlike Catherine of Aragon, who had been seen as gracious and dignified and was often portrayed as proud, ambitious, and overly assertive, her swift rise to power, while Catherine was still alive, led some to see her as a manipulative homewrecker rather than a rightful queen. Her lavish lifestyle and perceived arrogance further damaged her popularity, particularly among traditionalists who remained loyal to Catherine and the Catholic Church. Anne's position at court was further weakened by a series of failed pregnancies. After giving birth to Princess Elizabeth in 1533, she suffered multiple miscarriages, including what is believed to have been a male child. Each loss was a blow to her standing with Henry VIII, who continued to hope for a male heir to secure the Tudor succession. As her inability to provide a son became more apparent, Henry's affection began to fade. Her strained relationship with Princess Mary, Henry's daughter by Catherine of Aragon, only deepened public resentment, and reportedly treated Mary harshly, insisting she acknowledge and as queen and Elizabeth as the legitimate heir. This alienated not only Mary but also many supporters of the old queen and Catholic loyalists throughout the kingdom. Though intelligent and politically savvy, Anne's enemies grew in number. Without a son to protect her and with the king's favor waning, her once powerful influence began to erode, setting the stage for the tragic downfall that would soon follow. Beyond her political role as queen, Anne Boleyn played a significant part in the religious transformation of England during the early 16th century. She was not just a catalyst in King Henry VIII's break from the Catholic Church, and was also a true believer in religious reform, with deep personal convictions that shaped her actions as queen. Anne strongly supported the translation of the Bible into English, making scripture accessible to ordinary people for the first time. At a time when the Latin Bible was reserved for the clergy, Anne's advocacy for English translations was seen as a bold, even radical move. She believed that every individual should be able to read and understand the Word of God without needing to rely on priests or the traditional church hierarchy. Her court became a haven for evangelical reformers, scholars, and theologians who were advancing ideas aligned with the Protestant Reformation spreading across Europe. She often protected and promoted these figures, using her influence to help them publish works and gain the king's attention, and also owned and read many religious books in English and French, including texts by William Tyndale, a key figure in Bible translation whose works were banned in England at the time. Anne's commitment to reform extended beyond religion. She was active in charitable efforts, often using her position to fund hospitals, support poor relief programs, and sponsor education. She also contributed to the arts and culture, commissioning works that reflected new ideas and values of the Reformation era. Though Anne Boleyn's queenship was brief, her religious and cultural impact endured. Through her patronage and advocacy, she helped lay the intellectual and spiritual groundwork for England's move toward Protestantism, a legacy that would shape the nation for generations to come. As Anne Boleyn's time as queen progressed, her position at court became increasingly unstable. The death of Catherine of Aragon in January 1536 removed a long-standing obstacle in Anne's path, but it also shifted the dynamics at court dramatically. Instead of solidifying Anne's hold as queen, Catherine's passing gave King Henry VIII the freedom to pursue new interests, most notably Jane Seymour. Jane Seymour, a quiet and seemingly obedient lady-in-waiting, soon caught Henry's eye. Unlike the outspoken and reform-minded Anne, Jane presented herself as the opposite: modest, traditional, and submissive. These qualities appealed to Henry, who had grown weary of Anne's strong will and failure to produce a male heir. As Jane rose in favor and sensed the danger, and their rivalry quickly deepened. Anne's political challenges also grew. Her relationship with Thomas Cromwell, once an ally in the Reformation cause, began to deteriorate. A major point of contention was the fate of the wealth being seized from England's monasteries. While Cromwell aimed to channel it into the crown's coffers and consolidate royal power, Anne reportedly pushed for more charitable use, favoring religious and educational reform. Their disagreement turned into open conflict, and Cromwell, a master political operator, began to see Anne as a threat to his influence. These tensions, personal and political, converged into a perfect storm. With Henry's affections shifting toward Jane Seymour and Cromwell turning against her, Anne found herself increasingly isolated. Her enemies began to gather evidence, true or false, to bring about her fall from grace. In a court where power could vanish overnight, Anne's downfall seemed inevitable. The once celebrated queen now faced betrayal from every side, within the palace, from former allies, and even from her husband. By the spring of 1536, Anne Boleyn's downfall had become a brutal reality. In a swift and shocking turn of events, she was arrested and charged with adultery, incest, and treason, accusations that carried the gravest consequences. Among the accused were 5 men, including her own brother, George Boleyn, Viscount Rochford. The charges claimed that Anne had committed adultery with these men and plotted the king's death, acts considered high treason against the crown. Historians widely agree that the evidence presented during the trials was flimsy at best and likely fabricated. The charges appear to have been politically motivated, orchestrated by Thomas Cromwell, possibly with Henry VIII's approval, or at least his indifference, and had become an inconvenient queen. Unable to bear a male heir, politically divisive, and now replaced in the king's affections by Jane Seymour. Despite the questionable evidence, the trials were swift and brutal. The accused men were convicted and executed, and was tried by a jury of peers, many of whom were hostile toward her. She was found guilty and sentenced to death. On May 19, 1536, Anne was executed at the Tower of London. In a rare gesture of mercy, Henry ordered a skilled French swordsman to carry out the execution instead of using a common axe. Dressed in a gray gown and crimson robe, Anne addressed the crowd with dignity. She did not protest her innocence loudly, but instead prayed for the king and spoke gracefully, saying she hoped God would preserve him. Anne's final words reflected her poise and strength, even in the face of injustice. She knelt calmly, and with a single stroke, her life was ended. Her death shocked many, and in the years that followed, sympathy for Anne began to grow, leading to a re-examination of her legacy. Following Anne Boleyn's tragic execution, her life and legacy underwent a dramatic transformation. Initially, Anne was buried in an unceremonious grave at the Tower of London, without the grandeur befitting a queen. Her death was perceived as a dark chapter in English history, with her reputation tarnished in the immediate aftermath. For many years, she was remembered as a scheming, treasonous figure, an adulteress who had betrayed her king and her country. Her reputation suffered particularly during the reign of her daughter, Queen Mary I. Mary, the Catholic daughter of Catherine of Aragon, viewed and as a symbol of the Protestant Reformation that had deeply divided England. To many Catholics, Anne was a dangerous figure, one whose actions had helped provoke Henry VIII's break from Rome. Mary's reign saw a continued effort to erase the memory of Anne, who had been instrumental in the establishment of the Church of England. However, Anne's legacy underwent a remarkable rehabilitation during the reign of her daughter, Queen Elizabeth I. Elizabeth, having succeeded Mary in 1558, was keen to reframe her mother's history. As a Protestant queen, Elizabeth presented, and as a martyr for the Reformation, someone who had died for her beliefs. She promoted the narrative that Anne's death was the result of a politically motivated plot, orchestrated by those who sought to silence a woman who had been a key figure in the establishment of Protestantism in England. In this new light, Anne came to be seen as a pioneering figure whose role in England's religious and political transformation was finally acknowledged and celebrated. Over time, her image shifted from that of a tragic and villainized figure to one of a courageous and misunderstood queen, whose sacrifices were integral to the religious changes that shaped the future of England. Anne Boleyn's rehabilitation was gradual, but by the 19th and 20th centuries, she had become a symbol of Protestant martyrdom, a figure admired for her intellect, courage, and indomitable spirit in the face of adversity. Anne Boleyn remains a figure of great complexity. She was not just an ambitious and intelligent woman, but also deeply devout and profoundly influential in shaping the course of English history. She entered the tumultuous political world of Henry VIII's court as an outsider, yet her intelligence, charm, and strong convictions allowed her to climb to unimaginable heights. Anne was not only a key player in Henry's marital and political decisions, but also an advocate for the Protestant Reformation, a movement that would forever alter the fabric of English society. However, Anne's life is often oversimplified, and she is frequently remembered as the other woman, the catalyst for Henry VIII's separation from Catherine of Aragon and his subsequent establishment of the Church of England. In popular culture, Anne is often painted as a seductress or a manipulative figure, but her story is far more nuanced than these stereotypes suggest. Anne's ambition was not just to become queen, but to see England free from the influence of Rome, a vision that aligned with her own religious beliefs and the political climate of the time. At great personal cost, Anne reshaped England's history. Her marriage to Henry VIII and her role in the Reformation paved the way for the religious and political upheaval that would define the Tudor era and beyond. Yet, Anne's influence came at a tremendous price. Her life was tragically cut short, and she was executed under dubious charges that many historians now regard as false. Despite her early death, Anne's legacy has been re-examined and appreciated in recent centuries. Her contributions to English religious and political reforms are increasingly recognized, and she is no longer simply seen as a tragic queen but as a pivotal figure who played a crucial role in the development of modern England. Anne's life and legacy remind us that history is often written by those in power, and that complex figures can be reduced to simplistic narratives. Her story invites us to look deeper, to understand the motivations and struggles that shaped the lives of those who came before us.